Mi smo svi se nešto odmarali i danas mogamo dalje razgovarati. Sad imam prvog predavača, gospođa Olga Draguni iz Univerziteta u Varšavskoj. Biće nama pričala referat Strategy of Answering to Secularization in Socialist Times, Several and Comparative Perspectives, Polish Catholicism in Bosnia and Islam.
Basically. Unfortunately, I will speak in English because my Bosnian is very weird since I've been living before in Macedonia, and whenever I try to speak in Bosnian, something weird happens, and recently I even said do kraja na juni, so we do not want that to happen here. However, I do understand Bosnian, so if you really want to, I don't know, like ask some question, it shouldn't be a problem. Since we have time, I'll shortly introduce myself so you can know the perspective. In Warsaw, I've studied European studies, political sciences, then Arab Islamic studies, and I've recently finished my PhD on Macedonia. It's a PhD on Slavic identity in the 19th century. During my PhD, I decided that it makes no sense to learn one of the most difficult languages in the world, meaning Arabic, and then do nothing with it. So I tried to marry somehow Balkans and Islam, so I applied for an Erasmus stipend here, and I came and spent 10 months at the Faculty of Islamic Studies, at the, let's say, Faculty of Theology. And then I stayed here because apparently Sarajevo is a very beautiful place and I somehow cannot leave. And like preparing myself for future work, I started wondering why, for example, we do not examine, let's say, religious discourses in comparative perspective, and that's why also here you have maybe not an obvious choice of Polish sermon and Islamic sermon mainly. Because for me, if I I mean, of course I can compare, for example, Croatian Catholicism with Polish Catholicism, and it also makes sense, maybe it's even more coherent. But I think that in search of more universal answers, this range should be broadened. That's why I chose exactly Polish sermons and in fact, I also broadened a little bit the Islamic sources. Who are the representatives I've chosen? Well, from the Polish side, there's also a very kind of difficult situation for me because we have Poles here who probably do not know many things about Islam, and I didn't know, like, for example, what's the level of knowledge about, I don't know, Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński among people who are here, or for example, the priest Popiełuszko. So some things I will say may sound very, very basic, and for this I apologize. So I chose, when it comes to Polish sermons, I chose Stefan Wyszyński and mainly priest Jerzy Popiełuszko. And then I was trying to find some representatives of Islamic discourse in Bosnia who would be also somehow not only influential but would live in similar times. So it could be anyhow, let's say, comparable. So for Bosnian side, I chose Hussein Jozo and Ismet Sparkic. Also because it was quite easy to have the works printed. Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński and priest Father Jerzy Popiełuszko were very important figures of during the times of socialism and for the movement Solidarność, which ended up very tragically for Father Popiełuszko, who was actually murdered by special services. Before that, he was arrested, and he was also accused of, here's the quote, overusing the freedom of conscience during the speeches, and apart from religious content, he was dishonoring the state authorities. Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński, in turn, who died in 81, Popiełuszko was murdered in 84, and most of his sermons are from the time 1980 until his death. Cardinal Wyszyński died of natural reasons in 81, and was also a very important figure in the 50s. He was temporarily arrested between 53 and 56, and I think it was the, like, if you even, what was important for me was that about the choice was, let's say, the recognizability among Polish people. If we're asking, for example, Poles who would be the important priest in the times of socialism, it would be for sure Popiełuszko and Cardinal Wyszyński. And of course the Pope, but I treated the Pope somehow slightly differently. In turn, Hussein Joseph was born in 1912 and died in 1992, and he was a reformist in Islam. He has like very, I would say, in some terms, very complicated biography, because after his studies in Al-Azhar in Cairo, which is, like, we could say, the most important center of Islamic theology in the Muslim world, at least among Sunni Muslims. When he came back, he was for some time an imam for the SS troops, which ended in his imprisonment. He wasn't sentenced to death by Yugoslav National Army court. He was sent to hard labor, and then when he finished that sentence, he worked, and then he became again, like, he started working as an imam, as a very important also figure for Islamic movement here. And Ismet Svahić was born in Zenica in 1940. Chief imam head imam in Visoko between 65-78, and then maybe what's important, he was the main khatib, being like the main person who would provide khutbah, that is sermon, in Gazi Kusrubegova Jamia since 85, and main imam. Well, it's a kind of complicated story, as he maybe what is most important about his sermons happens after the dismantling of socialist state and after the war. That's a very, very important moment and change in the discourse. So I think that's the introduction of figures, and what I also have to say, this presentation is only, let's say, an introduction to a broader research I intend to do, as I said. So if you have any comments, I will be very grateful to receive them, because that will make the research better. What can be said? Of course, we have to remember that the environment, historical political environment, is different at that time in Poland and in that time Yugoslavia, because early 80s is the time when martial law was introduced in Poland. So many parts of the sermons provided by especially Father Popiełuszko are just reaction to very harsh measures and, let's say, introduction of kind of police state, worsening economical situation, reintroduction of rations, yes, which even were more extensive than after the war. So that also is some kind of a context. I would say that I could, let's say, find central elements which were common for these sermons, both. That was, of course, natural. It's a religious discourse, so the issue of ethics was central. Issue of ethics and how it related to the socialist state, how it would be found within, let's say, secularizing forces of the socialist states. Of course, you can hear that I'm not using the term communist, I'm using the term socialist kind of on purpose. So what is common are the notions of freedom, truth and love, and solidarity. But they are understood differently. We can say that in Polish discourse, especially freedom is instrumentalized to strengthen the nation and nationality. Also, let's say both narratives try to at the same time try to remain within socialism and against materialism. But it's again understood differently. Maybe I will use some quotes. For example, Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński, I have the quotes here and here, yes. So Stefan Wyszyński says that Marxism rebuilds capitalism, enslaving person through the system of production. It's a kind of interesting way of underlining the meaning of freedom. Freedom, which is central, like essential in this Polish discourse, where Father Popiełuszko says that even God does not violate conscience, and that freedom is reality implanted by God in the human being. Serves, and there's also a notion of, I cannot translate it properly, maybe you help me, powołanie do wolności. Can you or not? Or maybe into Bosnia. Okay, so I'll try to...
Powołanie, predestynacja, to jest...
No, it's like a call, but it's a religious notion. You can be powołany to become a priest, you can be powołany to become a saint, and here you have, it is a religious concept in Catholicism that, let's say, God calls you. It is somehow related to predestination, but it's like an impulse from God, and you are, let's say, somehow obliged to reply. Yes, exactly. So Popiełuszko speaks about call, yes, powołanie to freedom. This, of course, is aimed against the government. What is interesting in comparison to narrative present, for example, in Hus and Joseph's publications, is that, of course, there's also the issue of freedom, but it's never against the government. In fact, the Bosnian narrative, Bosnian Islamic narrative, underlines how it's, or like focuses how one can be Muslim within a socialist environment and still, let's say, remain a Muslim. And the narrative is more focused on inter-communal relations, with a huge stress that there should be good. I would say that if there are like two main subjects. First is education of Muslims, and the second one is inter-ethnic, intercommunal relations. What Islamic narrative does is it tries to find social thoughts within Islam that would justify existence within this system. Again, like in one of his articles, Joseph says that today's youth believes in science, and only through science we can, we as for example Muslims or imams, we can reach the youth. So it's a very strong call to educate. Also that relates strongly to the khutbah itself, because let's say up to the 20th century it was led in Arabic, and then there was this reformist movement to introduce sermon in Bosnian language so that the people could actually understand it. Well, in Poland, one would say that exactly the narrative is entirely against the government, against materialism, against nearly against socialism, which is kind of interesting because one could also find, let's say, social elements of Christianity, but it is never used. It is never incorporated. What Popiełuszko says, for example, is society drawn on pure materialism base refuses to give freedom when it submerges the spiritual needs to economic dominance. It's also very, very weird how Polish narrative uses those economic notions and immediately tries to flip it to spirituality and instrumentalize it against the government. In all the sources I was reading from the time of socialism and Bosnian sources, I didn't find a similar thing. The narrative in Bosnian case changes after the war, and then, I mean, of course, like understandably to a large extent, one can find a very strong change from this ecumenical perspective to rejection of dialogue, which is actually very present in the sermons of Stahić. Another issue which is very different is approach to nation, because I would say that all the sermons from Polish side are nationalist. Nationalist in this very messianic way of understanding, where a nation is a victim and a nation is inseparable from religion. And also the nation is very closed, it's very oriented towards itself. It is also seen in the sources used. For example, Popiełuszko is using figures from Polish history, Polish poets, but he never uses, and to some extent, let's say, figures from Christian European history, but he never uses anything outside, which was a surprise also for me that I found in one of the articles of Hussein Joza reference to the encyclica, I don't remember the English word again, of Pope John 23rd, Pacem Interis, or Pacem Interis, which was from 1963. So it's like, for a Polish person, it's kind of difficult to imagine that, for example, a priest could refer to a source from Islamic world, where here it's possible. Yes, he's actually referring to a work written by a pope and addressed to all the men of goodwill, and it's somehow possible. Well, as I said, this Polish discourse is in fact nationalist. Again, because of course, and it's also, let's say, breaking the rules of censorship, because we cannot say that there was I don't know that for example socialist government was allowing this and it was in favor of nationalist narrative. No, it was just against it. Well, for example, I found two how to say the plural, let's say fatwa of Hussein Joza from early 70s, where he explains, for example, Bosnian nationality. He's asked by people from, those are actually people from Sarajevo, asking about Bosnian national identity. And what he answers is that basically it's not nationalism. He immediately says that socialism, let's say, provides good inter-communal relations, and he explains that this differentiation between Muslim written in small and big letter serves, especially the big letter, serves only to reclaim equal rights which are guaranteed by socialism to all the entities, and this way that before introducing Muslim nationality with big M, Muslims were treated worse as something external, as something Turkish, as something negative. So in order to avoid that association, the Muslim nationality could be introduced, but it doesn't stay in, let's say, in opposition to let's say, socialist values, and it's not nationalistic. It's just reappreciation of self. That's how it was. That's how it was explained, which was also kind of interesting for me in comparison, because at the same time in the narrative of Poles, you can have this whole complex of Mother of God, which is always the protector of Polish nation, which is inseparable from the church. And maybe for the end, I'll just say that what also is kind of interesting in Polish narrative is that it refers to universalist, universalist theme of Christ dying at the cross as a slave. That's a concept introduced by Piłuszko. He tries to say that because Jesus wasn't, for example, executed in a different way. He wasn't executed in a way that belonged to Roman citizens. He wasn't executed as in a way that belonged to Jews. He was executed as a slave. And that is a moment in which, let's say, Christianity is there's no division in Christianity. We're all slaves, yes, and we are all victims. The victimology in Polish sermons is very, very strong, and also kind of stays in a position, which is of course a very common theme in all nationalist discourses which aim at changing the system. To sum up, well, so what's different? Because of external, I think because of external reasons, well, we can speak about instrumentalization of religious discourse. In Polish case, in Bosnian case, it comes later. It comes after the war. It comes mainly, at least to that extent, and it is also very, very much combined with let's say, sense of being a victim. It's also very vividly seen on the example of Fulton package, as I said, who until the war is super ecumenical, and he's like insists on having very good relations with other ethnicities, and then after the war he just, let's say, turns around the back also from the West and from other communities. We can speak of enclosure, which again, I'm not criticizing it. I think it's pretty much understandable. And also, so I would say that in Bosnian state, in Bosnian situation, from the sources I've read, late 70s, 80s are like pre-instrumentalization state. And also what probably makes it easier to combine socialism and let's say Islam here is that the critique of the socialist critique of capitalism can be combined with Islamic values, like for example in the sources I've seen, for example, there was a merge of values considered as European, like for example drinking alcohol, with Western, or for example consumptionism with West. And again, let's say West was more criticized or as more material. So I suppose it's to some extent, maybe not entirely, more easy to let's say, to combine it than in Polish case, where the church, which claimed that it does not entirely at all try to undermine the state, actually did it. It was more like to some extent nationalistic, but also and definitely I'm not saying again not nationalistic in this very harsh term, which it sounds bad in English, but for example in Polish we have differentiation between nacjonalistyczny and let's say narodowościowy. So in English you have only one term, so it might sound more harsh. Okay, so I think I will leave it up to now, and if anybody has a question, we can talk. Thank you.
Sada molim gospođu Toruńu, koja će nam predavala tak temu 120-godišnja povijesna i kulturna baština Poljske u Bosni i Hercegovini.
A ja više pomoći.
Aha, dobrze.
Ja sam podaję się.
Dobrze.
Konferencja.
ovom svojom temom vratit ću se opet na poljsko stanovništvo u Bosni i Hercegovini, to je prva stvar, i možda ovim referatom odgovorit ću na pitanje koje je već bilo postavljeno, jer ima još Poljaka u Bosni i Hercegovini. Ima. I sad ćemo saznati da su oni već od 120 godina i da, kako bi rekla, da ima kod njih puno dešavanja. Znači, moja tema je 120-godišnja povijesna i kulturna baština Poljske u Bosni i Hercegovini. 1. kolovoza 2015. godine na dan Pirovijade obilježava se 120 godina postojanja poljskog sela Čerinovac na području Bosne i Hercegovine. Prema povijesnim izvorima, kolonije između 1895. i 1996. godine osnovalo poljsko stanovništvo naseljeno u okviru austro-ugarske kolonizacije. Mjesto Čerinovac, kako i možemo vidjeti, nalazi se na sjeveru Bosne i Hercegovine, blizu hrvatske granice. U prošlosti ovaj prostor bio je slabo naseljen. Sve se je promenilo zajedno s dolaskom stranih kolonista, ne samo Poljaka, ali i gledajući na sela koje se nalaze pored Čerinovaca, imamo i Ukrajinaca i Rusina, znači i Italijani su Njemci, a između ostalima Mađari i Čehi. Čerinovčani su slabo proučena skupina. Prije negdje 40-50 godina istraživao je njih Dušan Drljača, srpski etnograf, a prije nekoliko godina stigla je kod njih poljska istraživačica Hrana Krasovska, koja je napisala 2 članka o poljskim gorštacima iz Bukovine. Ovdje, po tom izrazu poljski gorštaci iz Bukovine, vidljiva je posebnost Čerinovčana. Njihovi korijeni vode porijeklo s jedne strane iz istočne Galicije, a s druge iz okruga Čačca i Bukovine. To znači da se sastoji od primarnih te sekundarnih kolonista. Sad ću to malo objasniti, samo da prođemo. Tu još možemo vidjeti stanovništvo Čerinovaca krajem 19. vijeka, kako su izgledali, a kako izgledaju trenutno. Imaju čak svoj ansambl koji se zove Zmaja. I ovdje imamo kartu i objašnjenje kako je odakle su stigli i zašto su toliko posebni. Ja ću se malo približiti. Znači, šta znači izraz sekundarni kolonisti? Da nisu odmah iz Poljske išli u Bosnu i Hercegovinu, nego još su negdje bili. Znači, to su ti kao gorštaci, kako se njih zove. Oni su iz okruga Čačce, to je sadašnja Slovačka, išli u Bukovinu, to je sadašnja granica između Ukrajine i onda tek krajem 19. stoljeća otišli su u okviru Austro-Ugarske u Bosnu i Hercegovinu. I ovdje isto u Bukovinu išli su isto u okviru ove habsburške kolonizacije. Onda imamo još i to je drugi dio tog stanovništva, to su Poljaci iz istočne Galicije. Oni su ovdje, znači istočna Galicija, znači sad je isto na granici Poljsko-Ukrajinskoj, ali ovu skupinu, ovo dio tih Čerinovčana, oni su bili čak, mislim, neki su bili iz Volunja, neki su bili onda tu malo gorije, onda su bili blizu Krakova, znači to je cijelokupna Galicija. I onda su oni primarni kolonisti zato što su iz Poljske išli u Bosnu, nisu išli nego preko drugu zemlju. I to je, mislim, vrlo zanimljivo i problem je kako da se njih zove, znači jesu to gorštaci iz Bukovine, su to poljski gorštaci, kako jesu to možda čadesko-bukovinski gorštaci, znači ima puno pitanja, a drugo, čak mislim i bitno je pitanje kako zvati drugu skupinu, jesu to Poljaci iz Galicije, galicijski Poljaci ili Galicijani, što se i ponekad tako njih zove, pa mislim je vrlo upitno, ali za mene i najbitnije kako su se oni sami zove. Znači, u sadašnje vrijeme smatraju se da su Poljaci, i mislim to je najbitnije, ali još dan danas ponekad se može čuti kako su se prezivali, znači to stanovništvo iz Bukovine zvalo se da su Kuculi, a ovo iz Galicije Mazuri. I to je, mislim, vrlo zanimljivo. Dobro. I sad, tradicije i folklor koje su donijele ova dvije skupine, vremenom su skoro pa izumrle. Razlozi koji su doveli do ove situacije su međusobno povezani. Sad ću predstaviti najbitnije. Znači, najbitnije je za mene da je problem stalnog boravka izvan domovine. Ja mislim da to je problem svake manjine. Drugo je život u sredini koja je etničko te nacionalno različita. Etničko da to nisu Poljaci iz jedne regije, nego su iz Bukovine i iz Galjice. Znači, tu prvo. A nacionalno to su miješani brakovi između Poljaka i najčešće Ukrajinaca te bosanskih Srba i Hrvata. I ono što ja smatram da je najbitnije, zato što to bi moglo biti u svakoj, mislim, državi. To što sam ja rekla, to bi se tičilo svake nacionalne manjine. Ali to što je najbitnije, to je drastični pad broja Poljaka, mislim, do kojeg je došlo isto. Ima, mislim, nekoliko razloga. Prvo je to što smo već čuli, to je reemigracija na takozvane zime zahodne i punosne. Znači, to da bi to prevela zapadne i sjeverne krajeve. Nakon drugog svjetskog rata. Prema statistikama, oko 18.000 Poljaka napustilo područje ne samo Bosne, ali generalno bivše Jugoslavije. I to vidimo isto ovdje na karti. Imamo opština Boleslavec. Većina Poljaka je tu stigla. S onima koji su ostali, Poljska je država, mislim, Poljska komunistička država je prekinula kontakt. Tek sad, mislim, u nekoliko godina opet su sklopili kontakt sa tom manjinom. Imamo i još ekonomski razlozi, to je ekonomska emigracija. To su tako kako je bilo i u Jugoslaviji. Oni su isto, mislim, imali iste probleme, znači to ne samo, mislim, izvan bivše Jugoslavije, ali i tu, znači prvo u Sloveniju, ali ima i neki koji su otišli u Austriju i Njemačku, da. I onda ono što je još, to je treći pad, mislim, stanovništva, nije to toliko puno ljudi otišlo, ali izbjeglištvo toliko rata. I sve to, iako sam ja rekla da tradicija i folklor skoro su izumrle, sve to ne označava da u sadašnje vreme učenje ne njeguje se poljske kulture. Nakon, mislim što je vrlo bitno, nakon Mirovinskog sporazuma iz 1995. godine i potpisanja novog ustava te prvog zakona o pripadnicima nacionalnih manjina, položaj tih manjina u Bosni i Hercegovini relativno se je promenio. Imamo još i zakon o financiranju i udruženju. Mislim da to su bitne ove tačke zakonske koje su, mislim, stvorile ovaj prostor za udruženja, za nacionalne, mislim, za udruženje nacionalnih manjina. Šta je još, mislim, to je prvo, to je zakon. Još jedno što je bitno, to je to što se vidi vrlo, mislim, vrlo izražava se istoriju Europskoj uniji. To je to da se promoviše svoju regiju po nečemu ili po nekome. I kako to izgleda? Znači, dosta tih opština ili regija pokazuje, mislim, hoće promovisati sebe, kao pokazivajući da ima kod nas te nacionalne manjine. I to je isto dobro za te, mislim, zbog i fondova i, mislim, Čejnovac pripada opštini Gradiška, a opština Gradiška je prihvatila više od 10 nacionalnih manjina, znači oficijalno. I to imamo, a još je jedna stvar potrebna, o tome piše, da bi se vraćala tradicija, piše o tome to Erik Hobsbawm, to je kulturološki, iz kulturološkog smjera, kulturološki pristup. Piše on da je još potrebna osoba lidera, znači da je osoba koja će nešto podignuti, koja će nešto osnovati. Bez toga ništa neće se nikad napraviti. I takva osoba je u Černovcu, ona je podignula udruženje Poljaka i prijateljama koji je za cilj uzelo održavanje te vraćanje poljskih tradicija i običaja. Posljedica ovog procesa, mislim, ne samo lidera, ali i ovih tih zakona i te možda, ako možemo reći, mode na nacionalne manjine, jednostavno kvalitetan folklora koji predstavlja nepobitnu povijesnu, ali prije svega kulturnu baštine Poljske u Bosni i Hercegovini. Ta posebnost najbolje se izražava u obrednom kalendaru činovca koji ću vama ukratko predstaviti na primjeru od dva praznika Uskrs i Pirogjada. I tu je, mislim, vrlo bitno naglasiti zato što vraćanje ili u smislu nije dobar prevod na hrvatski izmišljavanje tradicija, to je kulturološki isto pojam. I to ne znači da to je nešto, mislim, nenormalno, to je sasvim normalno, to se svugdje dešava i svake godine. Tradicija je nešto što mi smatramo da je već dugo ili od uvijek, nije tako. Većina tradicija to nešto što postoje od 2, 3 ili 4 godine. Ali tradicija je tako uvreće, mislim. Sad u Poljskoj ima dan prokletih vojnika, da bi nekako mogli prevesti. To su vojnice u kojima se, mislim, tijekom komunizma nije smjelo govoriti, sad se vraćaju. To isto je neki način tradicije praznika i sad mislim, vidim kako se o toga govori i kako imate oficijalno obilježavanje. I to je to da tradiciju neki praznik može se uvesti oficijalno kao država, a može to što stanovništvo, znači od dole bih htjela. Znači kao, možda se nama čini to više prirodno. Ali to je sasvim normalno i svugdje se to dešava. I to još ovdje vidimo, to udruženje Poljaka i prijatelja Marka. I tradicije. Ja bih htjela malo, mislim, vama reći kako izgleda Uskrs i kako Pirogjeda i kako tu dolazi do vraćana tradicija. Od 2012. godine na dan prije svjetnice udruženje organizira radovnice u izradi palama. Prije Čajinošćani su nosili u crkvu bukete cvijeća, što je u skladu sa hrvatskim nazivom. Sam izraz palma poznaju samo najstariji članovi sredine i označava šimšir. Sve se je promijenilo pod utjecajem istraživača. To je vrlo bitno zato što sam ja taj istraživač. Generalno uvijek se zna da gdje uđe, kad istraživač uđe u sredinu, uvijek je promijenjen, uvijek utječe na njih. Može ponekad manje, ponekad više. Gledajući da sam ja Poljakinja, istražujem Poljake, to je veliki utjecaj i inspiracija na jednu i drugu stranu. Jednom sam pogledala kako svjetnica izgleda kod nas i kako se može izraditi nove palme. I dobila sam zadaću po zahtjevu udruženja da napišem kratak tekst o palmama u Poljskoj i šta to znači za nas. I se sjećam fragment na nekim područjama postoji čak takmičenje u izradi najboljih i najljepših palma. Ove palme mogu biti visoke i do nekoliko desetaka metara, ostvario se u izradi palme od 3 metara. Znači vidimo te promjene, te modifikacije, prvo ću vam pokazati, to su radinice, to su te palme. Ovdje vidimo tu visoko, znači još ne vidimo da je onako dolje, to je gornji dio crkve. I to je, utjecaj istraživača je ova istu palma koja se malo razlikuje, koju je kupila moja mama da donese. Znači to je taj utjecaj kojeg se ne može ponekad izbjeći, ako, mislim, možete smatrati neki istraživači smatraju da je to dobro ili da je to loše. To je, mislim, bitno. I ovdje vidimo neku modifikaciju, znači i u tome vraćanje izmišljavanje tradicija isto podrazumijeva ovu modifikaciju, koju ćemo malo više bolje tu vidjeti, to je šikoč. Znači još smo u Uskrsu. Šikoč, znači Poljaci, znači vidim malo zašto se smijemo, zato što znamo na šta nama podsjeća. Ali kad pogledamo da nam, kod nas u brdima na oruju zovu šikarnica, to može tu imati ono. Znači šta je šikoč? Šikoč je liči na špricarku od 2 drva je, tako se izradi, ali zašto? Zbog kojeg razloga? Znači vidimo to, da. Prema najstarijim govornicima, ovaj šikoč izrađivali su djedovi za unuke za takozvani posmrtništvo. Znate što je kućni kut? Pitam Poljake, zato što ovisno od regije možemo da znamo Zlane ponižavajući uzmeni usta. Tako, da. Kada su mladenci hodali od kuće do kuće i polivali djevojčice s vodom i tražili od njih pisanke. Kako se to vodom poliva? Znači uzima se vodu, ja ću pokušavati da objasnim, i može se polivati vodom i to će se vidjeti, to se je bračno. I ja mislim, znači to je moje mišljenje, da otkrivanje svoje baštine u učenovstvu izražava se u tom običaju, u šikočenju. Mislim da je ova tradicija započela proces ponovnog zainteresovanja svojim identitetom i korijenima. Mislim da to je bila prva tradicija koja se je vratila. Najmlađe generacije poznavale samo po pričama odraslih. Mislim, ili te srednje generacije ili onih baka i djedova, kako su radili i zašto. Ali stalno su pričali, znači stalno su bile u sjećanjima. I ako nije se to izraživalo, dalje se znalo da to postojalo. I kako sad izgleda? Zato što sam rekla da, znači, od 2011. godine oficijalno održava se ova tradicija šikočenja. Umjesto ponedeljka, zato što kod nas je to na veliki ponedeljak, sve se dešava nedeljom, tako da bi što više ljudi mogu učestvovati u prazniku, posebno oni koji rade u inostranstvu. Promijenio se isto okvir tradicije. Tu je možda vidljiva će biti najviše od modifikacije. Prije šikočenja je bilo način utvaranja ovog šikovanja. U sadašnje vrijeme ciljem je održavanje tradicije, a samo običaj predstavlja se u formuli takmičenja. Znači, ko će najviše vode, mislim, u kantu, taj će pobjediti. I još pirogijada. Pirogijada pripada na prvu subotu kolovoza. Izbor datuma nije slučajan. U ovom jednom mjesecu pripadnici činovačke sredine koji rade u inostranstvu ustaju su doći na slavi. Znači vidimo, tu možemo vidjeti kako se tvore tradicije. Mislim, to je zanimljivo zato što lakše je nama gledati onoga koga ne poznaju nego samih sebe. Zato što, kažem, vidim vrlo u Varšavi kako sve se mijenja, kako naravno se ne znam o Jevrejima, o Poljicima, kako nastaje nove tradicije. Ali šta je ovdje? Praznik, znači i to se može smatrati, znači, mislim, svaki od nas bi rekao, mi nemamo te tradicije piroga, znači nemamo dana piroga. A imamo, zato što neke mjesta u Poljskoj isto imaju takav dan pirogijada i na taj dan, mislim da se zove Džin pirogu. I isto izgleda, znači isto se priprema piroge. To vidimo kako je nastavio tradicije, mislim na području Poljske isto tako, isti način. I praznik počinje se u lokalnoj crkvi, svetom misom, koju nakon mise krene svečana procesija do kapelice Majke Božje, koja je poslije oko 50 godina ponovno podignuta, a originalna skulptura Majke Božje vraćena. Znači vidimo stalno to vraćanje se nama spominje. Nakon završetka procesije, koju još malo pogledamo, a to. Slijedi kulturni nastup folklornog ansambla Makta ostalih mladih pripadnika Srednje Čajnovčana. Gosti kao što su predstavnici Poljske ambasade u Sarajevu te vlade opštine Gradiške, drugih udruženja Poljaka te novinara imaju mogućnost gledanja budućeg nastupa. A onda, ono što je najbitnije, je degustacija piroga.
To je najbitnije. To je najvažniji moment.
Da.
Sreća da je posle ručka.
I vidimo kako se narod okuplja, kako se druži. I ono što vidimo ovdje su neki iz novina se nam uzela primjere. Poljaci oživjeli nacionalnu tradiciju, znači ono za pirogijadu. I Poljaci oživjeli svoju tradiciju opet. Pirogijada u Čerinovcu. I ono što sam ja htjela, zato što sad je zaključak, mislim, to su bili neki samo primjeri, ima više tih tradicija i više i dešavanja u Čerinovcu, cijelogodišnjih, nije samo preko ljeta ili proljeća, ali ono što sam ja htjela naglasiti, sa jedne strane, da selo, mislim, mjesto Čerinovac je u sadašnje vrijeme jedino kompaktno selo Poljaka na području Bosne i Hercegovine. Ima još i Poljaka više, ali to kao selo, kao cijelosno gdje žive Poljaci je jedino. A druga je stvar da naravno da ono pokušati prevesti iz polskog, je to neki citat, mislim isto osobe koja se bavi isto kulturom. Naravno da tradicija i kulturi su izmišljenje, a društva konstruisana, ali to ne znači da mi smijemo je smatrati da su nerealne ili neistinske, zato što jesu istinske. Hvala puno i ove godine 120 godina se slavi na dan prvog jazde, to je ljeto, onda mogu svi doći pogledati kako to izgleda.
Hvala puno. Hvala puno, gospođa. Sada mislim da posljednji danas predavanje gospodine Kamila Marčina Šarčevskog, like stavljače da stolne svi, Galicija na Bosni i Hercegovina s Ipnom Kazu Lijena.
Like savages who sailed the seas, Galicia and Bosnia and Herzegovina seen from absolute Vienna. I will focus, there will be a little comparison between Galicia and Bosnia because sometimes it's not that obvious how many similarities exist between two territories. But I will mostly focus on perception that Austrians, basically mostly Austrians, had in Vienna of both of these territories. So this is how it looked on the map, and we can see the peripheral location of both territories. It was about at the beginning of the 20th century. And this is a personification of Austria-Hungary from a liberal newspaper, satirical liberal newspaper from 1878, so at the time when the occupation of Bosnia and Herzegovina began. We can see unangenehmer Zuwachs. We can see the inscription, which means unpleasant growth. We can see this personification of Austria above, this little old land, and here below the new Bosnia. So we can see like a lot of probably black people, some colonialist discourse. It will be a lot of this discourse. I would like to warn you. Sources I used mainly were memoirs, letters, like private letters, mostly of officials or soldiers. that took part in, for example, occupation of Bosnia, or that were coming to Galicia in 19th and 18th century, and satirical newspapers, because they showed it was a very popular type of newspapers then in Vienna. There were few titles, but this title carried was the most politically engaged, I would say. They had the most ambitious content, because others were like gossip about what's going on in the Habsburg family or in Vienna. But this was like very political. So the Galicia and Bosnia and Herzegovina and Habsburg monarchy, they were both, as we could see, like these peripheral territories in terms of geography, but also division of labor. Like it was very visible that, like the center, Vienna, tried to keep those territories, especially Galicia, because it was a much longer part of Austro-Hungary, as an agricultural territories, a multi-ethnic, with like it's common knowledge how multi-ethnic is Bosnia, but Galicia, which doesn't exist anymore, at the time was really multi-ethnic society. There were two main groups, of course, Poles and Ukrainians, which were called Ruthenians at the time. Quite comparatively big Jewish community, and other smaller communities like Lemkos, Romkowie, Hucos, Huculi, and so on. And the tension was also, from time to time, we can see here a picture from a newspaper from 1908, when the namiestnik of Galicia, the highest official in Galicia, he was Duke Potocki, was killed by an assassination from like Ukrainian student who is perceived nowadays, especially in Western Ukraine, as a national hero. So separatist movements, assassinations, especially at the end of the 19th century, it was gaining pace, and both was strategically and militarily very important. Galicia because of Russia, and then the First World War took place like very much in Galicia, and also Bosnia was supposed to be this beginning of expansion into the Balkans especially in the direction of Thessaloniki. And they were perceived, and in fact they were much less, like worse developed, like poor and neglected. It was the time when the partitions of Poland happened, when the Polish state was already in this state of decomposition in terms of sociological, political, very weak. And Austro-Hungarian rule was using similar explanation for its expansion. I find it quite funny, because at the time partitions of Poland were already seen in Europe as a breach of international law. And Maria Theresia, the Empress of Austro-Hungary, was much aware of that. But they were saying that the little part of Galicia was in the Middle Ages part of Hungarian kingdom. Therefore, we had the right to invade quite big part of Poland. And we know that also in relation to Bosnia, this discourse was used, like Bosnia in medieval ages was under influence on Hungary, so we have the historical right. An anachronistic social structure. You know, it's about Bosnia. In Poland, when partitions of Poland happened, serfdom was quite hard in comparison with other Western, especially European countries, and then the Austrian administration was trying to use this and present Habsburg monarchy as the power that brings civilization and freedom to people. So I mostly now focus on these similarities in discourse and presenting in perception. So modernization as a legitimacy of conquest. Vienna was explaining its imperial policy of conquest by invoking its mission of bringing civilization, order, development to poor and neglected former parts of Poland and the Ottoman Empire. The Habsburg administration developed this discursive practice in order to construct state legitimacy. And we can see here the caricature from a newspaper, Austrian newspaper, like Austrians bringing toothbrushes, because it's an obviously racist depiction. This bird was the personification of the redaction of the newspaper. They were always, when they wanted to show their views, they were producing caricatures with the bird. So it is the opinion of the redaction, but I think it represents very much the opinions of Austrians. Here we have some travel book from 1795-96, where Balthazar Hackett, a traveler who was traveling through Galicia, was writing about epidemic of disorder and that should be fought with absolute severity, and that Habsburg monarchy was sending political doctors to cure this poor Galicia that needs help. So it's not really invasion but cure. Another example, an official in Lviv, Ernst Traugott Kortun, 1790, was writing about peasants in Galicia, like savages of southern seas are amazed by European sheep, so the Galician farmers are amazed by the gift that they received from the kind-hearted monarch, who gave them freedom and ownership. These reforms of Josephinian reforms were really improved the situation in the countryside, because peasants had the right also to send, for example, children to educate to some other work than being a peasant. But it's really interesting that he adds that, but they reacted with idleness and drunkenness and serving the Jews. So because they didn't know what to do with this freedom, they reacted with in this way. And another anonymous from 1886, the first anonymous that I couldn't find the name of the author. It was obviously apparently anonymous writing. He was writing about Bosnia, which is an Asian country that needs to be made European. So Bosnians must be made Europeans out of Asians, and this is already very colonial discourse. And Samuel Brodecki, who was writing in 1812 about Galicia, calling it El Dorado, India, Siberia, this comparison with territories that were outside Europe and that were colonial was very common in relation to Galicia as well as to Bosnia. It is commonly, I met it many times. This is 1876. I wanted to show that this discourse about Galicia as being poor and almost not worth of expansion was not only typical for the end of the 18th century, but also the same discourse was used at the end of 19th century towards Bosnia and towards Galicia. So he was writing about real troglodytes caves. He was going through Galicia, somewhere near Lemberg, so Lviv, and he was seeing this awful musty, thatched roof houses and real troglodyte caves, half-naked children, endless wasteland. This was how Galicia was present in Vienna, because most people didn't really travel there. Leopold Liteński was writing in 1902 about economic rebirth of Galicia and writing about African conditions there. This is interesting because very often Polish elites that then moved to, for example, to Vienna to study they were repeating this, they were like repeating this discourse towards their own land where they come from. And Edmund Haura, he was a soldier, a Czech soldier who came in 1878 to Bosnia, and he wrote obrazki z okupacji bosenskiej, and he said that Bosnians were cannibal enemy. Zulus, Barbarus, Nyam-Nyams, Bechuans, Hottentots, and similar South African bands behaved more chivalrously towards European travelers than the Bosnian Turks did towards us. I would like to know how should they behave towards occupation, towards an occupator that was coming to their country. Should they, I don't know, chivalrously welcome there in Bosnia? So this was the. I found, which is really interesting, the perception that colonial status of Bosnia, that already the people living at the time perceived this as colonial. And he was a professor of Leipzig University in 1914. He wrote, "There cannot be a doubt that Bosnia and Herzegovina was conquered by Austria-Hungary as a colony and stayed as such to this day." And the journalist, a German journalist, 1896, was writing, "There is basically colonial policy in Bosnia." And here we can see French, the only, not Viennese. It's not a source, I just wanted to show this depiction that how it was perceived in Europe. The Tsar of Russia, Emperor of Austria, they are sharing the Ottoman Empire, and very similar, very well-known caricature from the end of 18th century, Le Gâteau des Rois, how the three emperors are sharing Poland, the royal cake. There was an exhibition, very interesting exhibition about a year ago in Krakow, in International Culture Center, I think. And in the catalogue, prepared by a few academics, there was very interesting part, like saying typically colonialist practices were implemented in Galicia, playing of different ethnic populations and religious groups against one another, imposition of an external, non-vernacular language, German of course, and restructuring of education and the predominantly agrarian economy. So basically, especially in the beginning, they were trying to play off Greek Catholic Church against Roman Catholic Church to undermine the position of Roman Catholic Church, Roman Catholic priests, and also peasantry against our landowners. What I presented before, they were saying that the emperor brings freedom to them. This ended very miserably in the middle of 19th century with the so-called Rzeźka Licyjska. The slaughter of in Galicia, when the peasants basically killed thousands of landowners during a few days. And another feature of colonization, typical, so colonization, settlers. In Galicia, there were German-speaking settlers. It was very well prepared, colonization. They were even designs how the church in every settler's village should look like, how should houses look like. And in Bosnia, of course, we know that the only difference is that in Galicia, the Vienna was trying to only to settle German-speaking population. In Bosnia, they were settlers from different parts of the empire, but I think it is understandable because of the change of the political system in Austro-Hungary. Already then it was the double monarchy and very much decentralized. So it was reflecting the change. This is the design I mentioned of a church in a settler's village, and what attitude stayed behind what the thought was behind the colonization. Franz Krater in 1791 was writing, "If then the German language is spread fully across the land. He was writing, of course, about Galicia, and through this, the people are more familiar with our way of life and our morals, and are Germanized. So it will occur quite naturally that the next generation must already be less rough, less prone to alcoholism and idleness, less bigoted, less a slave, therefore more industrious, entrepreneurial, clever, and more sociable. You know how it ended in the 20th century, this thinking of German culture as bad culture, and but it was already very strong, visible in sources, and with the end of the 19th century, I observed, especially in newspapers, a really shocking intensity of anti-Semitism also, which I mention a bit later. How Bosnia was seen in 1878. For someone who didn't observe this, who didn't never think or read about the sources especially, it was really unwelcome in Vienna. So, especially in Budapest, of course, but in Vienna also. They were saying that it's expensive, it's waste of money, it's not worth of this expansion. There were comparisons to Cyprus. Why? Because in Berlin in 1878 it was decided that Cyprus goes to the United Kingdom and Bosnia goes to the Austro-Hungary. So they were showing this caricature what you can do in Cyprus, like almost a paradise, and here's just sowing money. This is just sucking money from Vienna, of course. I find it very interesting in comparison with nowadays discourse in Western countries about expansion of the European Union, about enlargement. It's a waste of money. They are not worth to belong because they just suck our energy. And compared to Franz Josef Land, about 10 years, I don't remember now exactly, about 10 years before expansion in Bosnia, explorers found Franz Josef Land, this far north Arctic land, northern from Norway, and it was declared Austrian territory, and then about 10 years later Bosnia. And in this caricature you can see like, okay, it was really bad in Franz Josef Land, but Bosnia is much worse. Like with Toruńu, this like the Arctic land is much better. This is another caricature. It was a cover of one of the numbers in July 1878. Marriage of Bosnia and Austria. Austria is a tall, quite strong woman, full of life, and this Bosnia like really poor guy, small. And Andras, the foreign minister of Austro-Hungary, is giving them marriage, and he's asking them, "Do you want to marry each other? Do you like it? Do you love each other? No, we hate each other. So live long and happy. You are now wife and husband." And here's another caricature. After the Congress Berlin, the other foreign ministers are coming to their countries bringing peace, the palms, especially the Otto Bismarck, and Andras comes, "No, we have to we need to make this invasion. It's horrible. Like we hate it. We really don't want to invade." It is really interesting because a very similar discourse was used during the partition of Poland, as King of Prussia is supposed to say that Maria Theresia was crying, but she was taking. She didn't want this. This is maybe one of the reasons why Austria didn't take part in the second partition of Poland, because Maria Theresia was not a fan. Her son, Joseph, was a big fan of expansion. And she was crying, but she was taken. And very similar perception of Galicia existed, of course, also in Vienna. Here is a very famous sopranist from Lviv, Irena Abendot, and the inscription says, "We sent already so much money to Galicia, at least we can have this voice in return." And also presented as a waste of money, peripheral territory, which takes financial advantage. And the discourse of liberation. I mentioned it before, so presenting Francis II announced in 1788 that the reforms made his subjects in Galicia from slaves to free people. We must say that he improved the situation, but it was far from truth. And Benjamin von Kalai, of course the most important person in administration in Bosnia, in an interview for a British newspaper, Daily Chronicle, said Austria is a great Occidental empire charged with the mission of carrying civilization to oriental peoples. Rational bureaucracy is a key to Bosnia's future. And this discourse of liberation was not only about social relations, not only but also about poverty. So they are supposed to liberate the new territories from poverty. And that's why it's very visible, like especially about Galicia, what they were writing, the writers at the time about Galicia. It's a horrible land. Like even children are ugly, and horses, dogs are ugly in Galicia. Everything is ugly. Everything is like ugly. You cannot imagine. So better don't go even there, because I'm telling you it's ugly. It's not worth of your attention. And this is Filius, it's a pseudonym, a man who was traveling around Bosnia with his own car in 1908, automobile, called at the time. We went through many forgotten Turkish villages. They were mostly dirty and consisted of clay huts. Even in the common weekday, the Turks sat in sweat idleness in front of their huts and under the doors of their houses. So very similar depiction. We saw these troglodytes caves in Galicia, and their houses like something that cannot be called a house. A discourse of liberation from poverty in Galicia. It was from Jewry, especially after I could observe this change. It became really harsh. The anti-Semite discourse about 1885, I would say, and it began worse and worse. This was a big one-side caricature showing probably the emperor and what is supposed to be done in Galicia. Here's Galicia, and there are birds. They have side curls. So we have to liberate, because the problem, the poverty in Galicia and the horrible situation is in fact it's because of Jewry. It was at the end of 19th century, even the Galicia became a synonym for Jewry, for Jews. So before it was the discourse was presenting as a problem aristocracy. Then the Jewry became the aim. And in Bosnia, I found few signs of this, as it was perceived that Bosnia is poor, Bosnia is backward because of Islam. Because it's some natural inherited feature of Islam that it must be backward. And here's an example. Aman Schweiger-Lerchenfeld was traveling through Bosnia, das Land seine Bewohner. He wrote something like a guide, and he wrote, Europe owes Christianity its high culture. Allegedly, the aim of the European culture can be only to make disappear the circumstances and institutions that are reluctant to change, no matter if they are religious or social nature, not violently, but through civilized efforts. The name of the chapter I took it from was Islam as an obstacle for culture. So it's not kind of a culture, it's an obstacle for culture.
Savojski spalio tu kulturu, on je kulturan grad.
And the depiction, how, like, to sum up, I realized that there were some common features of depiction of Galicians and the population of Bosnia, very often dehumanized, So like here, like the Austrians, as we could see, the Austria personification of Austria was a real man, a real woman, and Bosnians were shown very often like something between an animal and a man. And Darwin's discourse in anthropology, it was becoming very popular, of course. We must remember that it was time when Darwin fashion became, like, we realized, oh my god, it has something, somewhere at the beginning, it was the name, and regrettably, it was very often applied to anthropology. So, if someone were poor, it meant that he was somehow on the way to become better, more on this ladder of evolution. The racist, of course, and the Balkanist discourse in terms of like how it was named, created by Todorova. I would say that she was saying that it was very much about Balkans, but I can see very much similarities also like with the how Poles and Poland was depicted very often. Not only Galicia, but also Poland. So probably he could expand this term, and because I don't see that much difference. There are this difference of being more exotic, more oriental when it comes to the Balkans, but also Poland and the South, like Central Eastern Europe, is also the discourse is very, very similar. So okay, I know it could be said much more, but it's 20 minutes. I try to do my best.
Thank you very much. Puno hvala za zanimljivo predavanje. Zanimljivo je isto za mene zbog toga da ja sam iz Galicije. To je za mene jako zanimljivo. Da, ja studiram u Toruńu, ali rođao sam se i školovao u Limanovi koja je blizu Krakova, to je Galicija, zato mene jako blizu ovo predavanje. Mislim da mogu otvoriti diskusije. Molim, ako netko ima pitanja za predavača, molim sad.
Kako je, mislim, zanimljivo je da je Bilinski, na primjer, Goran Bilinski je iz Galicije. On je bio, mislim, čak i član Sejma iz Sabora, kako je političko...
On je bio član Poljskog koalice u parlamentu u Beču.
To znam, ali je iz Galicije.
Da, on bio je profesor u Laborskog univerziteta.
Mislim, ovaj diskurs sada odnosno na Galiciji, ljudima iz Galicije i Bilinski, ja ne želim da pitam, ja samo kažem da je malo ovako neobično da je predstavnik iz Galicije, bude na jednoj takvoj funkciji, ministar je bio za Bosnu i Hercegovinu, tako mogu kažem, odavde niko nije imao takvu poziciju iz Bosne i Hercegovine.
I'm sorry, I'm afraid to speak Bosnian. I understand, but boję se. So I know that there was a problem, the assassination. I showed the picture of the assassination. There was this problem that Ukrainians felt represented in Vienna, and there were many public. Many officials who were from Galicia, and they were almost like not almost, always they were Polish. So it was also a way of playing the... Exactly. And this is a typical colonialist policy. And it ended with bad. So it's worth to remember that it had the history, also the tension in the 20th century between Poles and Ukrainians had its, and as I saw this depiction, there were these assassinations. They felt that they are not represented enough because both groups were very similar in terms of numbers, but Poles were perceived as the leaders of Galicia. So that's why they also took this official posts that were responsible for the whole Austro-Hungarian policy.
Już netko nie mam pytania.
So, do you know were there different representations of other groups? Like, were they distinctive or just, with similarities? Like, I mean, similarity, but if other groups, for example, within the empire, were similarly depicted?
You mean like other parts of Austro-Hungary?
Yeah.
Not really, because Czech, and this part of I haven't found any this kind of depiction of Croats, for example. They were very much presented. Of course, there was this problem that Croats can become bigger because of the expansion in Bosnia, so they will want the third part of Austro-Hungary. And then they were, I would say, they were respected also because they were a danger. And no, I haven't met. Of course, the German part was always depicted as the best part, which Czech part of the Austrian Empire was already seen as Austrian part. It was shocking for Austrians that Prague became a capital of another country. They were perceiving it like a German city, and there were and of course Budapest and Hungarians were the second power, and Austrians were always afraid of changing something in this very in this balance. This was also the problem with Bosnia, because Hungary really didn't want Bosnia to be part of Austria-Hungary. There was this situation in November of 1878 when the parliament of Budapest was trying to topple the prime minister, Andrássy. He was the foreign minister of Austria-Hungary and prime minister of Hungary. They wanted to topple him because he made this invasion on Bosnia. They didn't want it. And but also the perception was the Hungarians were not shown in this way. So I would say Galicia, because of the poverty, because of the multi-ethnicity, because of Jewish question, and Bosnia for some other reason. But at the end, depictions and perception seems to be very similar. I thought now about Croatia, no, I've never seen anything like that. There was this depiction of course, of Turkey, of Serbia, but they were not the part of the empire. Thank you.
Ja možda imam za kolegicu. Da li u Čelinovacu postoji neka, ne znam, pločica, neki spomenik, zahvaljujući kojem moglo bi se saznati da na ovom području su živjeli Poljaci?
Mislim da nema tako ništa. Znači, ali
Samo probe, ali da, na primjer, kao turisti idu u ovaj grad, da mogu čitati nešto, neke informacije.
Da, zato što, mislim da što je imamo predstavljeno da, mislim, ono što...
Da, opština je prošla, znači, na projektu vidljivost nacionalnih manjina na području opštine Gradiška, tako da ćemo dobiti table koje će usmjeravati prema Ćelenovcu, prema kulturnim objektima Poljaka, prema crkvi, prema grobu, prema kapelici i to koje se sve ostale nacionalne manjine na području opštine Gradiška.
Da, to je prvo, što je Maja rekla, to je sigurno groblje, ali ima, da, kapelica, ali ima još ono da ima ovo,
Župna kuća.
da, i tamo, po tome, zato što tamo, mislim, možda se slika od centra gdje postoje biblioteka i tu se može nešto istaviti. Tu je ovdje vidjela Poljaca, neka druga, manjina, mislim, najviše.
Pytanie. želi? Niko ne želi? Pa dobro, mislim da naša konferencija može biti zatvorena. Hvala puno svima da ste bili zajedno sa mnom i s nama, da smo te 2 dana nešto razgovarali. Nadam se da bilo je dobro iskustvo i za poljskog stručnjaka i za bosanskog stručnjaka. Mislim da ove informacije koje mi smo ovdje čuli i jučer i danas bit će dobar prilika za početak dalje istraživanja. Čini mi se da istorija to je tema na kojom treba gledati i lokalno, ali prede svega treba gledati globalno. I kada se bavimo istorijom Bosne, istorijom Poljske, moramo gledati na ove probleme sa perspektive ne samo ove zemlje, ali također mislim da bi to bilo je šire viđenje. Hvala za gospodina Kamerovića, hvala za vlade biblioteke, hvala za ambasade Poljske da mene pomogla. Izvinite za sve neke probleme, ali nadam se da vaše mišljenje o ovoj konferenciji bit će dobro za svih predavača. Molim da do kraja, do pola avgusta molim o tekstove o kojih mi smo ovdje čuli, zbog toga da želimo izdati knjigu koja bit će dokaz našega susreta i ništa, nadam se da bit će svi zadovoljeni i mišljenje o ovoj konferenciji bit će dobro i nadam se ako u budućnosti bit će tako potreba da ponovo se susretimo i ćemo također razgovarati na više teme. Hvala vam.